There we go. Dragons in the system, I swear. All right, hello everyone, creatives, community, kind folks out there. Welcome to the channel. Today is Discord Tuesday, kind of a catch-all. We tend to default towards game mechanics and things, but of course, this entire week we're talking about the classic, the infamous, the notorious, the impossible to comprehend, but is an artwork everywhere. We're talking dragons, and of course, we're also simulcasting with our classmates and collegiates over at Fantasy Grounds College. If you join their Discord and you are having trouble or you just don't prefer to interact on YouTube, you can always interact in the Discord. Just join the Fantasy Grounds College Discord, and once you've talked with the faculty over there and hung around with some of the students, slide down to the boiler room on the left, and that's where all the cool kids are hanging out. All right, so I hear you, P. Oh man. So, all right, where was I? I think I was here somewhere. All right, so yesterday, of course, we talked about some of the historical aspects of dragons and how to incorporate them into a gaming world and some of their tactics and things. But I thought today we would also we would bear down a little bit when it comes to a lot of their tactics, maybe some of the places that they exist, and maybe even some of the problems we have with incorporating them into our gaming world. So let's start out with some dragon tactics. Okay, so I think something that really surprises a lot of PCs is that dragons can fly. Oh, hell yeah. Oh, you're so silly there, Rickard. Dragon tactics. Burninate the countryside. Okay, that's okay. Step one. All right. Okay. Um, burninate the peasants. Okay. All right. That's step two. Burninate all the people. Yeah, because after you're done with the peasants, you have to move up the ladder of nobility, right? The important folk. You can't leave them out, even though they're going to think that they're immune to it. Burninate all their thatched roof cottages. I'm sorry, colleges. Well, the colleges too, after the cottages. Plur says, someone once said, quote, the difference between science fiction and science fantasy is if you can put a dragon into the world and it still makes sense, it's science fantasy. that's a cute little thing. I suppose that would change if you had a science fiction world in which instead of humans, dragons happen to live there. You don't often see dragons mixed with science fiction, though. You often don't. Like we mentioned yesterday, that dragons are the embodiment of most of humanity's fears all put together into one. And even in the gaming sense, they're a little bit of everything. They're a little bit of celestial, a big dollop of like fiend. They're also an aberrant creature from a place that we kind of don't understand. They are like a pinnacle of the food chain on a world, seemingly as if they've never come from any place else. They just happen to be one step above us in the food chain. They're also very dinosaurish as well, and in addition to the fact that they are so magical that even in a world of wizards, we sometimes hesitate to want to add in or hesitate as to how a dragon can even exist. It's crazy. And even historically, despite the fact that we have a lot of artists that have drawn dragons, there are cultures that describe their dragons as far more horrific than the scaled winged beings that we know of. Rickard says tactics as written down by the legendary dragon strategist Sun Trogdar. Who is that? Oh, that's fictional. Tesla Ranger says the Dragon Riders Return starts out seemingly fantasy, but ends up being sci-fi. The titular dragons were genetically engineered. I I was gonna save that for fantasy, Future Friday, Fantasy Friday. For Future Friday, the idea of genetically creating dragons, if it can be done, someone's gonna do it. Someone with enough money and enough money and time and energy is definitely going to genetically create a dragon, at least as close as possible until they can like break the code. If not, they're gonna, I don't know, give Komodo dragons the ability to breathe fire, or maybe attach some extremely large bat wings to them. I mean, somebody's going to do it. Someone's going to stretch that skin out and and curse the rest of us. Sure, Jurassic Park makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the next step is dragons. You know, dragons, maybe a couple of unicorns here and there. It's crazy, but I think one thing people, when it comes to dragon tactics, is the fact that first they're very ancient, and most of them have seen it all. Charlie, hey, what's going on? Charlie Square says Eldritch horror can straddle the gap between sci-fi and fantasy. Uh, I agree with you. I think dragons sit outside of a lot of our setting lore unless we've inserted in there, much like Eldritch horror. A lot of the Eldritch horror uh, information and setting material hasn't classically fit into the origin of giants, the origin of the Greek gods, the outer planes and such, you know. And similar to them, similar to the Eldritch horror thing, where they either come from the deep sea, or they come from an outer realm, not quite another plane of existence, not quite the edge of the galaxy. They just seem to come from this other place. Dragons seem to be the opposite. They seem to come from it. They have an earthly origin, but they exist as an other. And you, unless we shape our own settings, like the gods created them, or a comet slammed down on the earth and they were spawned that way, or something like that, usually they've existed long before we've had a history as to where they came from. They just seem to be, it's like, what came first? It's not chicken or egg, it's dragons and then everyone else, right? Plur says, I'm only really familiar with the D&D fantasy dragons and the more East Asian noodle ones, wyverns and drakes being basically the same. In many ways. Yeah, wyverns, drakes, serpents, giant lizards, dinosaurs, pseudo dragons, if you want to get down into the nitty gritty, pseudo dragons and half dragon sets, and of course sorcerers and dragon style magic, I suppose, would fit in there. I would absolutely allow someone to reskin a warlock to have a dragon as a patron as well. Just take one of the available warlock patrons and I'd reskin some of the abilities and things. But I think that fits in there too, where it seems as if dragon power is pervasive enough to become its own thing. It's kind of strange. Charlie Square says it's one of those genres that makes them one and the same. Oh, yes, concerning like dragons and eldritch horror, because even I could imagine a whole setting being discovering what the origins of the dragons would be in the first place. Because when it comes to a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, like dragons tend to be sprinkled kind of everywhere and yet nowhere. They hang out in the outer planes. Tiamat's kind of half trapped, half ruling in the nine hells based on what she's done recently. Gold dragons are hanging out with celestials. We've got, the other day we were talking about silver dragons hanging out in the clouds with cloud giants and things. I mean, they seem to be inserted everywhere, and yet and seem to have a specific origin. from, say, a dragon lord or a dragon queen or something, but at the same time they're on the outsides. And in a way that's really good because we can we can come up with our own lore. I know all of us have our own head canon when it comes to do dragons exist in our world, and if they do, how many are there, and what is their impact? And I think a lot of the a lot of our setting material, we almost do a post-apocalyptic design for them, meaning like they once existed and were killed off or died off, or magic was drained from the world and um, they could no longer be at their full power, and many of them are resting or in a kind of a stasis. Or if you want to go Game of Thrones, they keep growing until they're smaller and smaller, and the only thing left are like these eggs and legends until another one yet hatches again. So I love dragons, and I think this week we should try to figure out how to incorporate them more into, it's called Dungeons and Dragons, and I think we are in a dragon deficit. so yeah. Zev says in Zevron08 says, in the game Destiny, dragons exist despite it being sci-fi. They are wish granting beings that gain power by altering reality and granting us wishes that always lead to our downfall. Yeah, of course. They're called the Amkara, and I won't begrudge you if you can't pronounce it. Bungie made it super hard to pronounce for no other reason. Proper names, right? Or wish dragons. They subtly influence us to make wishes by invoking ancient magic by using a code phrase starting with O blank mine, like example, O champion mine, or O slayer mine, or O player mine. Okay. Kind of different. Dragons giving wishes. I, I'm I've never really considered that. Maybe I kind of lean that towards the Asian style serpentine dragons. I don't know. I've never thought of dragons granting wishes. Rickard says, let's go the other way. 400 dragons flying everywhere, having air traffic, air traffic lanes so they don't collide. I do like that though. I do like the idea of like dragons everywhere, dragon kings, um, uh, dragging public transportation. Yeah. Infinite role play. What's up? I love dragons too much to use them because to do them right equals TPK. Yeah. What was it? What was the comment the other day? Dragon grapples PC, bites PC, you flies in the air. No, makes a half move, grapples PC, continues its move into the air, out of range of continued attacks, blows breath weapon in the player, continues to rip player apart, drops player, as far as the dragon has flown as high as it is, boom, dead. Next round, yeah. I think that, I don't know why, but in PC's heads, the fact that dragons can fly and for the most part they're intelligent seems to throw people off so much. And let's be honest, right? I think not a problem. I think a metagame problem when it comes to using dragons, eldritch horror creatures, ancient vampires, liches, the highest tier big bads, is how much do they know about how the game works within the context and narrative of the setting. An example would be a dragon that focuses all its attacks on the cleric, or the dragon that knocks a PC down to 0 hit points and continues to use 2, 3, 4 more attacks to rip that PC apart so they can't have a chance to heal or something, right? I hear you, alley oops. Yeah, I wish me a sandwich. Yeah, yeah. I wish I was a sandwich, and boom, now you're polymorphed into a sandwich. Yeah, the dragons may be trying to achieve a wish spell. I don't know if are there dragons that can cast 9th level spells? I think would be pretty damn dangerous, because a dragon that lives forever that can cast 1 wish spell per day would be would just alter the landscape beyond anything we'd ever think of. Plura says, I'm okay with dragons. I don't like dinosaurs. I don't like dragonborn. I like lizard folk. It's weird. Names can put me off things pretty easily. I don't think you're alone, P. Um, the difference between dragonborn and lizard folk is like a fine hair, and some of us like one and don't like the other. I'm with you. And really, I always found it odd that, like, you know, dragonborn, lizard folk, kobolds, Sahuagin, kind of troglodytes, like lizard-like beings all having different origins, to me has always rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. Um, I always found, like, why wouldn't they be similarly have a similar genetic relationship? Maybe even yeah, I hear you, Infinite. Like a zero. What's he say? Like a 0 hit point character still breathing. Yeah, well, it's narrative, right? 0 hit points is kind of like out of the fight, but you know, how many PCs would balk at the idea that after your character gets knocked down to 0 hit points, the lich, the I don't know, the mind flayer, the beholder, the dragon is like, you know what? Yeah, you're down, but you're not out. I'm gonna rip you in half and proceed to slam you with its tail, or, you know, blow another breath weapon on top of you to absolutely positively guarantee that you're dead. Now, again, the problem comes in that on the player's side, they're thinking, well, yeah, I hear you do. No, I mean, I've had a PC destroyed that way. He's like, let them ball. Psst, psst, get out of here. Psst, whatever. Um, I hear you. It's one of those things where you're thinking, like, well, wait a minute. You're As a PC, you're arguing to me that this doesn't make sense, but you guys do it all the time. Like, if it's been around for 1,000 years, it's seen enough to know. And I've heard and seen horror stories of, you know, groups breaking apart. You'll see that online where people are complaining, like, well, why would this creature know to go after the cleric? Because he's seen it before. You know, I don't know. Uh, I don't know. I find that the big bads know just as much about how the game works as well as the universe, as much as the PCs, because they've just been around so much. They know how long it takes to cast a spell. They know what a blessing looks like. They know what lay on hands happens to be. That's just my particular opinion. Zev says, imagine a gold dragon police officer writing up younger dragons for speeding. Like, do you know how fast you were going in a community zone? Yeah. You're like, black dragon's like, what are you, a cop? Yeah, I'm a gold dragon. Like, oh shoot, forgot. Yeah, Infinite Roleplay says, well, all mechanics should have an RP element to them. I agree, and I think I think it would make sense in that sense, that, but I don't know. I can hear the arguments in it. Now you could foreshadow the hell out of it, you know, because, you know, dragons have enemies everywhere, and they're old and intelligent, or many of them, the older ones, are old enough and intelligent enough to know that, you know, the proverbial adventuring party that comes after them after being attacked, you know, 3, 4, 12 times, they're going to remember what the hell's going on, you know. Zevron says, I blame the surprise of dragons being smart and being able to fly on video games. In video games, a dragon will stop flying to go into melee for no reason when it has breath weapons and magics. I agree with you. Plenty of them just pretty much just land on the ground, stand in front of the hero, and it's just like the hero with their little tiny little longsword starts hacking at it, and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Why would he just, like, dump the mountain on top of him and be done with it, right? All right. Tesla Ranger puts in a Discord, Western dragons have varying levels of intelligence. Prior to Tolkien, they rarely spoke. after Tolkien, they are often portrayed as at least as clever as humans, and frequently much more. More traditionally, bestial examples still usually have a predatory cunning. And saying Eastern dragons, not only are they intelligent, they are usually a mentor archetype. I definitely agree with you that a lot of our mythology is shaped by what we would consider modern creations. So the idea of magic casting dragons, I think, is a gaming thing. Spell casting dragons, hyper intelligent dragons. I agree with you with the Tolkien, and after Tolkien, there were plenty of novelists, and then we go into mass media when it comes to television and movies. That a lot of the dragons speak with people, and of course, there's always I don't have a problem with the trope, but then there's of course the trope of dragon seems evil, hero wants to kill dragon turns out to be a good guy, right? The Dragon Heart movies and all the B and C level movies thereafter on like Sci-Fi Channel and stuff like that. Yeah. Rickard says dragon hunting tactics: dump a huge hoard of gold in the middle of a large abandoned area. All right. Announce to all dragons that it is a tribute to the greatest dragon, the greatest of dragons. Number 3, wait. one red, 2 black dragons, a clutch of green dragons, a white dragon, and their horde show up. Like, wait a minute, they were talking to me. No, me. Oh man, Infinite's like, oh my god, PCs decapitate everything. Yeah, even I don't know how longswords can decapitate dragons unless they've got really skinny necks, but they do it all the time. Charlie Squared says orangutans and gorillas don't evolve separately, That's why I like to change the design of dragons a lot, make them bug-like, woolly, etc. I've, although not very common, Charlie, I've seen people do that with dragons. Not very often, but like you said, bug-like, woolly-like, maybe more feline. Others that are, like you said, bug or insect appropriate, or mammalian, making them more mammalian with like a fur, or even aquatic with a smoother skin and such. I like that a lot. I know Dungeons and Dragons has a long history of creating like ecology books way back during the Dragon Magazine era, and well after that with the monster compendiums, including the fact of giving them a description. Part of me feels like they should have never done that. That I get that there's like green and blue and red and gold and copper, but the more information you put out there, the less space our imagination can take them. And so I have a problem when there's too much information, especially like, I think there's some that even tells you if some have horns, some have bumpy ridges, some have sharp claws, some have different types of wings. And I'm like, Dad, don't do that to me. Let me make up my own dragons. Alley Oops is like, yeah, keep on hacking. You'll be there for a while. Quick, grab the great axe. Gonna be a bit. Yeah, trying to saw through the gristle. My hands are tired. You take over. I'm not taking over. That's disgusting. Plura says there are a load of different dragons in How to Train Your Dragon. I love that movie. That movie series. Having carbon copies with different abilities always stuck me as lazy. Yeah, gold, blue, taupe, mauve, periwinkle, chartreuse. Yeah, and listen, there's a host of tertiary dragons and beyond. Steel dragons, void dragons, shadow dragons. I mean, there's so many of them. And I guess my problem with having tertiary dragons is like, well, we haven't worked our way through the top 10 before we start getting into like Asian dragons and things before we insert them into the world. So maybe we should fix that. Infinite says, Infinite Roleplay says, I had a fire dragon throwing barrels of lantern oil on the players, and woof. Traps and tactics and luring players into dangerous regions. Like you said, using barrels of lantern oil and lighting them on fire, assuming that this particular type of dragon lives in a mountain pass, right? Like a white dragon would definitely dump an avalanche on, the angry peasants that are coming after it. And if those angry peasants are led by heroes, whatever, dump an avalanche on them. Any that survive, freeze them to death because they can't move or they can barely breathe, or attacking a village during one of the worst blizzards of the century and timing it out. Like, why wouldn't they do that? Or flying away just far enough to lead an adventuring party into the deepest, coldest, airless regions of a mountain's top until they're exhausted, and then just turning right back around at them and just blasting the hell out of them. Yeah. Or befriending the Yetis and the winter wolves in the area, or at least forcing them to work for you. Yeah. Zev says, I remember I pissed off my group when they hunted a red dragon in my Egyptian setting. They look like crocodiles with leather wings. I like that. Makes perfect sense, right? And he just circled in the air and drive-by shot with fire. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, but that makes perfect sense. Every PC that has access to flight will, do drive-by fire, right? I'm going to fly in the air at my farthest range and shoot at it, snipe whatever it is, right? So it's okay for players to do that on the norm once they have access to it, but it doesn't make sense for an enemy that truly lives in the air. Is one, it's the beholder that attacks PCs down a vertical shaft, right? Or it's the mind flayer that attacks PCs through a solid wall using its psychic attacks, but it's behind full cover or something, or at least 3/4 cover. You know what I mean? Zev goes on to say, they asked when it would land. I looked at them with a raised eyebrow saying, why would a winged creature land the fight? You don't see eagles or hawks landing on landing on the ground to fight you, do you? You know what? Again, right? It's there's nothing wrong with the creature. There's something wrong with us and our expectations with it. Continues to say, Zev goes on to continue to say, the barbarian and paladin take shifts on cutting the head. The paladin starts wasting smites to cut through. Yeah. Oh man. Alley-oop says, for shits and giggles, the white dragon grabs a peasant and pulls the tree back and catapults the peasant and breathes on it and uses it as cannon fodder for the so-called group of heroes at a distance. Wait a minute. You can't just use innocent people for what? Yeah, wait a minute. Yes, you can. Ran out of boulders. Here's a cow. Frozen ice toss. Yeah, heck, maybe kill a peasant, turn it into ice, and then use it as a battering ram and just toss it at other people. Yeah. Leading the party over a frozen lake and then cracking the ice by just standing on it. Yeah. Pelora says, a lot of dragons are shapeshifters. Seen it in Spirited Away, the anime, and Divinity video game the last week. I'm pretty sure they are in Shadowrun 2. Can play with the trickster archetype there. I believe at least one of the metallic dragons, like brass or bronze or something, is a consummate trickster, and many of the metallics enjoy shape-shifting. I think traditionally in Dungeons and Dragons, the color dragons do not shapeshift on the regular because they're too arrogant, and that's kind of their modus operandi to say, hey, I'm a red dragon and you will respect me, hear me roar. Now, does that mean that they wouldn't have the ability to do that Of course they would. If they're pragmatic enough, of course you need to leave an opening for your players. So playing on their, like Rickard says, also dragons tend to be lazy and vain. Is flying needed? And Rickard says it makes sense, but makes for a non-fun combat. And see, that's the issue, right? If you're an immortal creature, would you get lazy after a while? Would your arrogance or vanity or overconfidence, megalomania, cause you to make decisions that are suboptimal simply because you want to show these upstarts what it means to stand before a godlike being? I don't know. I I think if players are smart enough and convincing enough, I could see them getting around the personality of a dragon and convince them of something otherwise. Maybe on first pass, no. If doing something stupid like, oh, great red one, Scarlet King, my crimson queen, please, I, worship you or something, and then Red Dragon's probably like, you're blowing it out your ass, dude, go away, right? So, you'd have to make it pretty convincing. The idea of dumping a big pile of gold in the middle of somewhere and saying this is for you, for the greatest dragon of all time, and having a bunch of them show up, I think is a pretty good idea. I think it's hilarious, and I would embrace that. Rickard says flying wastes a lot of energy, and we also have to remember that dragons are not birds. They, the Western dragons, tend to be lizards with wings. I could see that, but I think they would be tactical about it, like fly, and then land on a very high ridge. We've seen plenty of times, both in art and our media, and I think because of their capabilities, a dragon flies and lands on the top post of a castle spire or top of a mountain or what have you, or like you say, strafing fire and then going off somewhere else. I know it's not very fun, and for PCs to hear this, but landing hundreds of feet away, a couple of football fields away to rest, and then once they try to run towards you, you take off again. Yeah, it's not fun, but I think they would do it. And it's not fair, but that's why they're dragons. So Rickard says, so fighting on the ground isn't too far-fetched. Add to that burning everything into a crisp, good eating. Yeah, if they're the rain of fire, ash eating ones. Now, like I said, if they are landing for a particular reason, through deception, or maybe someone has found out a particular psychological weakness of a dragon, like a dragon likes crystals or it likes a certain type of food type, like I don't know, maybe it likes to eat northerners, or it likes to eat young maidens or something silly like that. I could see doing that as well. Yeah, Deadman and Zevron talk about gold and silver both have shape change at will. Gold, silver, and brass I know love shape shifting. Yeah. Pelora continues to say, and avaricious. They may be putting themselves in the way to stop people getting to the gold. Yeah, and it's such a weird, strange thing for us to think of dragons having a personality that far exceeds common sense, being the epitome. Dragons, especially in a Tolkien sense, was the epitome of greed, the epitome of arrogance, the hoarding of gold but never spending it idea, that it moves beyond the pale of a human being being greedy to the point of vanity or arrogance that just transcends humanity. You know what I mean? So I suppose you could make a dragon that is so vain that if you start flattering it, it won't see the person sneaking up behind it, or that if you're flattering enough, it will come out of its haven to hear words of flattery given to it for forever and ever. Maybe even kidnapping locals to groom it, or to speak of its to repeat over and over again its great uh, its great deeds from over the centuries, even if the people don't believe it. And the dragon's like, no, say it again. It's like, I need to fall asleep. It's been 18 hours. My feet hurt. Say it again. Okay. Oh, great red one. you know? Um, Alley says a dragon just lays on its hoard, and a lawful stupid paladin walks in and attempts to challenge the dragon. The dragon just yawns and thinks to himself, did someone leave trash behind? Grabs the pallet, tosses it out the cave, yells at the wormlings, you kids need to pick up your trash. Yeah, doesn't put their toys away. We're sorry. Puts the pally back into the into the toy chest. The paladin's the whole time swinging the sword, like I'm going to, and stuffs it back in the toy chest, like sorry, Dad, Mom, ish. Oh man, Zev, you have access to a nuke? Rickard says, correction, we as humanity could use a nuke to take care of a spider. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Now, not a real nuke, but the magical version of one, I think classically was are they called the dragon orbs? The different dragon orbs that can control dragons or something. There's always some kind of orb, sword, rod, medallion, ring, or something that can control dragons, which may be the quest to find something like that before the dragon realizes it, or is on a quest to send agents out to find these devices to destroy them, so that humanity literally has zero ability to fight back against them. I think that makes for a great setting as well. Yeah. Zed says, hey, I've hit spiders with books and they don't die. A nuke will make sure they're gone. Scorched earth is a good way to say I no longer want you to exist. Yeah, but now you got to survive afterwards. Although, but granted, dragons existing, yeah, nukes would come flying after them pretty shortly, especially if they start scorching the earth themselves. Ricker says, but speaking of mechanics versus logic, how long can dragons fly for? How long does it take before they can use another breath attack? I believe the how long they can fly has never been established. Like any flying creature, the lengths of time flying creatures can fly far exceeds the time standards that exist in normal gameplay. So, but I agree that I would use that as a narrative tool to say, hey, birds, how long can birds fly? How many hours do they fly when migrating before they land? I have zero clue. But then a small bird has like hollow bones in their wings. A dragon is the size of a tank, an airline, maybe tens of tons larger, hundreds possibly for the largest sizes. So is it measured in moments, minutes, hours, days? And then you're talking like there's always the default to magic. They can fly because magic, right? They do a thing because magic. So I mean, if you wanted to add a more gritty realism, not just flying exhaustion, but how much do they consume? How much body heat, if any, do they give off? How much space, a territory, do they hunt in? It's all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you can go down to. It's weird because you can fall down a logic rabbit hole that you're going to hit a rock bottom, and it's just not going to make sense at all. Most fantasy creatures are not going to make sense after a certain period of like, but why? But why? Because it is. But why? Yeah. But I hear you, Rickard. Deadman says gold and silver dragons had shift at will. Brass only had shape shift as young adults and older, and then only a limited number of times a day. The shape shifting at will part of it really lends itself to like gold and silver dragons loving and being part of humanity, living amongst humanity for large periods of time. And I think that's why it's a good excuse as to why they are not literally just sitting on hordes of gold and falling asleep, because they've been hiding in and amongst humanity for such a long time. And of course, we've seen silver dragons. The silver dragon elf connection, looking like elves, is a great thing as well. Maybe even silver dragons being leading elven communities makes a lot of sense. Tesla says in third edition they can use their breath weapon every 1d4 rounds. Is it true in fifth edition that they get to use their breath weapon? You roll a die 6, and if you roll a 5 or 6, to get to use it again. Someone popped that in there. Yeah, because magic. Yeah. Zeb says, so a dragon having these negative traits makes sense, but it's because they were made to be a pinnacle race. They are above most other mortal creatures in every facet, so of course they are prideful. Yeah, and I can see. I suppose you could make the case that the age of the dragon will depend on that. So younger dragons might be so prideful that they get themselves killed, which is why there aren't as many of them, despite the fact of breeding, the problem with breeding as well. And once you start moving up the chain of the chain of the age of dragons, they start going like, yeah, I know why my brothers and sisters were killed. I'm stupid, but I'm not that stupid, right? I agree with you. I'm hearing you, Rickard, because on one hand, all right, let's be honest. When we run a game and we want to include dragons in it, there is an expectation that the PCs will be given some ability to fight them. Otherwise, what's the point, right? If the idea is to make dragons such a pinnacle that they cannot be defeated at all, then what you're really doing is creating a setting where the dragons are really in the background. And by the time the PCs achieve, those upper echelon levels of power, 10th and beyond, they're starting to hit superhuman level. And so maybe at that point, they're able to contend with dragons, maybe, summoning. The PCs have powerful allies, or again, the PCs start chipping away at the forced labor that dragons may have from minions and such, and then of course drawing them out of their lair, hopefully. So yeah, the thing is that there's a reason why the heroes are. How can I say this? There's a reason why the story always takes place in front of the PCs, and so giving a dragon a weakness, whatever that weakness may be, whether it's a psychological weakness, a physical weakness. We talked about it's got a single scale, and you have to hit it there, or something like that. Tesla says 5e dragons recharge their breath weapons on a 5 or 6 on a d6. Yeah. So, the idea that dragons have a weakness, like, for example, maybe someone finds out that a dragon does get exhausted after flying, and so they create a decoy or a distraction for the dragon to cause it to do something and then do something else. Yeah. Yeah. Aliyub says, I dare you to kill some wormlings. Mama isn't far. If you happen not to be there when she comes home, she will hunt you down, even if it needs to be one-on-one or destroy the countryside to get you, which might blind. Hey, having a dragon blind with rage might be the key to getting it out of its lair and doing something stupid, right? It might just want to land on the ground, like we've been talking about them flying and strafing and stuff, and literally find that one person that killed its little young wormlings to teach it a lesson in front of everybody else, and then boom, the trap is sprung, right? So yeah. Rickard says, yeah, but so is a 15th plus level PC. I mean, they might be dragons, but they ain't gods. Some would argue the fact of dragons being gods, right? They're a little bit of everything, I think. So they are. I think. I think the fact that the power of dragons, yeah, neither are the PCs as being gods, right? I think the reason why we balk at the idea of the power of dragons is because we are humanocentric, and intrinsically we don't like the idea that we are at the bottom of the totem pole. And I think that bleeds over into our gaming sessions, right? We love the idea that there's always a way for us to solve a problem, usually with our own capabilities, and having an enemy that can't be defeated. Back in the day, there was a deities and demigods book, and of course, once you stat it, you can kill it, right? So then so then the makers were like, yeah, don't put stats to gods, you just can't kill them. And it's something gnawing at the back of our heads that, like, there has to be a way for me to overcome this thing. It can't just be impossible. And so I think Rickard is kind of shaping that. Like, well, wait a minute, there has to be a way. They're not the almighty things that they are. And my contention would be they kind of are. That's why they live so long, and so many people fear them, because they are like that. I think the fact is that most other beings of their level are not, they don't live on the mortal plane, so they're kind of out of sight, out of mind. Whereas, like, dragons don't have, or don't seem to have, their own dimension where they live, right? Like a pit fiend living in hell, we're like, well, it's undefeatable, but it doesn't live here, so I don't have a problem with it. Dragons are like Superman or Silver Surfer living on Earth, right? It's, yeah, you're too powerful to be here, but you live here anyway. Rick says, my thinking is more that if you want to go with a dragon always attacking and flying, they would be far less dangerous on the ground. Or if you want dragons to live underground in layers, then flying is not their primary mode of being. Zev contends that they should be dangerous. They are dragons. It goes on to say, that's like saying the dungeon should have treasure in the opening of the cave because the dungeon would be dangerous. Dennis, hey, what's up? Dennis Drangler says, my reasoning is they can't stay in the air because of their biology. They need to land after a while because they get tired. And again, it's a session zero thing, right? How cinematic versus how realistic do we want to play them? Now, and then, you can, they don't exist. So I could say, well, dragons can probably fly about 6 to 8 hours a day. And then somebody else can say, well, that doesn't make sense. They're 50 tons. They have a wingspan that, do the whole math and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure there are scientists that have tried to analyze, if a dragon was real, what would it be? And you could make the case that they can only fly for a few moments, or in your world do that. So I don't have a problem either way. But consistency is the issue, right? If you're going real, if you want to go far more gritty and realistic, then I agree with Rickard's statement that you should go both their capabilities and weaknesses should be on that realistic level. If you're going to go super cinematic, gloves off. Let them fly as long as they want. Let them blast strafe characters. Let them. To me, if you're going to let characters be superhuman, then let the dragons be superhuman. If the PCs are very grounded and your world is very grounded, then I would ground the dragons, at least in their behavior. Add jet engines to their wings. It's silly. Zev says Mama Dragon, if she was evil, might be like, hey, I ain't got no helicopter. I ain't no helicopter mama. Sink or swim, you overgrown salamanders. Which, again, helicopter mamas, yeah. do dragons raise their young? Do they kick them out? I don't know. Maybe they're like more lizardly than bird-like, and once they hatch, they're pretty like they're kind of like, I'm out. I'll see you later. Um, Rickard continues on to say, no, it's saying that if it's an air creature who always uses air tactics, it isn't skilled at ground tactics because it never uses it. And goes on to say, my point is that if you get it on the ground, it's probably dead. I don't know about that. But also, you would also have every settlement have double A turrets. Again, is it arrogance that makes a dragon land? Is it something that they're, you can't pick up things if you're in the air. So is it something they're looking for, or maybe making a proclamation towards the people that it's lording over, or making a good example? You want to set an example to threaten people. A human being walks out in front of everyone in the plaza and then cuts somebody's throat or puts a bullet in their head, right? You don't do it from a sniper rifle a mile and a half away and then send a flyer, right? You do it in front of people and all. So yeah, arrogance, I think, has a lot to do with that as well. Fantasy double A turrets, your plasma cannons, catapult plus rock to pebble plus heat up those pebbles with whatever spell you wish plus pebble to rock as you fire the catapult. Now, and here we go, right? PC comes up with thinking outside the box idea to take down Dragon. Dragon comes up with think outside the box thing to take out PC, and it's wrong. Come on, Rickard. Come on. Bad Rick. Yeah, plasma catapults. You guys are silly. Now, of course, dragons have breath weapons. Dragons have magic. Dragons can fly. Dragon lairs are absolutely brutal places to be for PCs to be inside of, whether it's a black dragon in a swamp with harmful insects and clouds of bugs and swamp gases and things, red dragons in their volcanic like mountainsides with rocks falling from the ceiling and flames blasting up from the ground. But I also find that when it comes to a dragon's lair, you could, because we're going to do this on Third Pillar Thursday, but did the dragon find the lair, or did the lair spring up around the dragon? There's even regional effects that dragons create. So to a large degree, wherever dragons have created their home, they've kind of tactically set up their place to be safe in the first place. So I suppose the flying, strafing dragon that never lands and doesn't confront the PCs might be a last resort if the dragon thinks that the PCs coming after them are just going to be killed or at least weakened by the region in the first place before they even get there, right? PCs won't be knocking on the front door and the dragon opens up the door and is like, oh, I wasn't expecting company, right? You're going to have to go through some pretty harsh territory before you get there. So I get it. See, there's Rickard says, or hell, just hit it with a bag of holding portable hole arrow. Yeah. The create the sphere of annihilation idea with the bag of holding portable hole. I hear you, which is my point in saying, dragons that use illusions, simulacra, mirror image, illusions, shape-shifting, teleport, using all of that stuff, like, I don't know, I think it just makes sense. Yeah, it's nearly impossible to defeat them, but I think it just makes sense. That's the whole point. Yeah, Rickard says, my point is, do you want it to be realistic or fun? Exactly. Sometimes, and there's a difference between, and there's nothing wrong with cinematic action versus realistic action, which is why bullets into gas tanks of cars explode in the media. We know that that's not what happens, but that's not very fun. It's what we want to see is gas trickling out, our hearts palpitate. Someone is inside of car, or bullet enters car or something, and then there's a big giant explosion. The Sometimes the fun outweighs the realism, and yeah, we love that. We like to wrap that around ourselves. Let me see if I can do this right. Okay, let's see. Zev says, "Mom dragon, oh my younglings, you look so strong. Oh, now get the hell out. This is my lair, and I don't see you paying rent. It's a dragon eat dragon world out there. Prove your worth." Yeah, it makes pretty sense, and I think it would go exactly that way. Like, I find that to be like a direct quote from a dragon. Like, "Oh, you look so cute. Pluck." Yeah, if you ruin my rep, I will track you down and make you beg for destruction. Yeah, and Plur says you need to be believable, not realistic. Yep, that's verisimilitude. It is within the context of the world. Does it make sense in the world that this thing is a real thing? Much like, does it make sense that Sauron in the world of Lord of the Rings needs to obtain the One Ring to come back into the world? Well, within that world, that's what it is. In Game of Thrones, people loved the creation of the dragons in that television series, and they couldn't talk. They didn't have magic. They had we talked yesterday about which kind of dragons do you guys like? Do you like the wyvernish dragons where the front claws are actually part of the wings, or do you like separate feline dragons with separate front limbs and then a sixth set which are of limbs which would be the wings, right? Which type do you like? Are they intelligent? Do they have super senses? How much do they weigh? Are they arrogant or whatnot? As long as it's consistent and it has enough verisimilitude within that world, that this thing that exists in the world makes sense, then you have your realism. So you have your believability, and that's all you really need. If your world is very gritty, and then all of a sudden dragons start doing things that don't make sense in the world, then you're like, yeah, no. But if your very gritty, realistic world, your dragons start pulling a lot of traits from, say, lizards and other creatures, I could see that. So anyway, guys, we've come to the hour mark. Thank you for tolerating the delay. Thank you for joining me. Tomorrow is World Building Wednesday. We kind of went off the rails a little bit today, but tomorrow, your homework is we are going to make a world where dragons don't necessarily rule, but they are the biggest motivating factor. So guys, everyone have a great day. I will see thee later. See you tomorrow.